In a quiet, almost forgotten town surrounded by rolling green hills and thick forests, there stood an old cemetery that many locals avoided. The place had earned a reputation for being eerie and unwelcoming, with stories passed down through generations about strange happenings and unexplainable events. Some claimed they heard faint whispers when walking near the graves at dusk, while others swore they saw shadowy figures darting between the headstones on moonless nights. Whatever the truth might be, most people preferred to stay away. Among the crumbling tombstones and overgrown weeds, one grave stood out like a beacon of mystery. It was perfectly preserved compared to its weathered neighbors, as if untouched by time itself. A pristine marble slab marked the spot, gleaming softly even under the dimmest light. Etched into the smooth surface were just two lines: Eleanor Grayson, and beneath it the haunting phrase, "The truth lies beneath." There were no dates, no loving words from family members, just those cryptic words that seemed to beckon anyone who dared read them. Clara, a young journalist in her late 20s, found herself drawn to this peculiar grave during one of her visits back to her hometown. She hadn't planned to return so soon, but after years of living in the city chasing big stories, she felt stuck. Her career had hit a plateau, and inspiration eluded her. Hoping to reconnect with her roots and maybe stumble upon something worth writing about, she decided to spend some time in the small town where she grew up. Little did she know this decision would lead her straight to the heart of a decades-old mystery. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Clara took a long walk through the countryside. The air smelled of fallen leaves and damp earth, and the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, casting playful shadows on the ground. As she wandered aimlessly, her curiosity led her toward the abandoned cemetery she'd heard so much about as a child. Though she remembered the warnings from older townsfolk, "Don't go there alone," she couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. When she arrived, the sight before her sent shivers down her spine. The cemetery looked exactly how it had been described: neglected and desolate, with vines creeping over broken stones and wildflowers sprouting randomly among the graves. But what caught her attention immediately was the solitary marble slab standing tall amidst the chaos. Its polished surface gleamed in contrast to the decay around it, almost as if it wanted to be noticed. Clara approached cautiously, her footsteps crunching against the dry grass. Kneeling in front of the grave, she traced the engraved letters with her fingers. Eleanor Grayson. Who was she? And why did someone take such care to preserve her resting place when all the other graves appeared forgotten? The second line, "The truth lies beneath," sent a jolt of excitement through Clara. Was this a clue? A riddle? Or simply poetic words meant to comfort those mourning Eleanor's loss? Her mind raced with possibilities. Could this be the kind of story she needed to reignite her passion for journalism? Something about the grave felt unfinished, as though Eleanor's tale hadn't ended here. Perhaps there was more to uncover, hidden beneath layers of history and secrecy. Determined to find answers, Clara made a mental note to start digging deeper into the past. Over the next few days, Clara became obsessed with learning everything she could about Eleanor Grayson. She visited the local library, a quaint building, filled with dusty shelves and creaky wooden floors. Inside, she pored over old newspapers, yellowed books, and faded photographs. At first, information was scarce. It was as though Eleanor had vanished without leaving a trace behind. But then, buried deep within a stack of brittle clippings, Clara stumbled upon something intriguing: reports of a missing person case from nearly 50 years ago. The articles painted a picture of a woman named Eleanor Grayson, a well-liked schoolteacher, known for her kindness and dedication to her students. She had disappeared suddenly, leaving behind no explanation or farewell. Despite extensive searches and investigations, no body was ever found, and no suspects emerged. Over time, the case grew cold, and Eleanor faded from public memory, except for the lingering unease among those who still remembered her. As Clara read through the clippings, certain details stood out to her. Neighbors mentioned seeing unfamiliar cars parked outside Eleanor's house in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. One article quoted a colleague saying Eleanor had confided in her about feeling watched, as though someone were following her every move. Another source hinted at rumors of a secret relationship, suggesting jealousy might have played a role in her fate. Each new piece of information fueled Clara's determination to unravel the mystery. But it wasn't just the facts that captivated her. It was the sense of connection she felt to Eleanor. Like Clara, Eleanor had once lived in this town, navigating its complexities and secrets. Maybe, in some way, solving Eleanor's story could help Clara rediscover her own purpose. Word of Clara's interest in Eleanor spread quickly through the tight-knit community. People began approaching her, sharing their own fragmented memories of the enigmatic teacher. An elderly man who had been one of Eleanor's students recalled how she always encouraged creativity in her classroom, inspiring him to pursue his dreams despite hardships. A retired librarian recounted how Eleanor used to borrow stacks of books on history and true crime, often staying late to discuss theories about unsolved cases. One particularly chilling account came from a woman who claimed to have seen Eleanor shortly before she disappeared. According to the witness, Eleanor looked terrified, clutching a bundle of papers tightly to her chest as she hurried down a deserted street. When asked what she was carrying, Eleanor muttered something about proof before disappearing into the night. This detail resonated deeply with Clara, reinforcing her belief that Eleanor hadn't vanished willingly, but had instead been silenced. Each conversation brought Clara closer to understanding the gravity of what Eleanor might have uncovered. Yet, with every answer came more questions. What proof had Eleanor been referring to, and who or what had driven her to flee? The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, but Clara knew that if she kept searching, she would eventually find the thread that tied them all together. By the end of the week, Clara realized she was onto something far bigger than she had anticipated. This wasn't just a missing person case. It was a story of courage, betrayal, and perhaps even conspiracy. As she gazed at the photograph of Eleanor tucked inside one of the newspaper clippings, a smiling woman with intelligent eyes and a gentle smile, Clara vowed to bring her truth to light. No matter how daunting the task, she couldn't turn away now. After all, the grave had already whispered its invitation. The truth lies beneath. Clara's days quickly became consumed by her quest to uncover the truth about Eleanor Grayson. Every morning she woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, her mind buzzing with questions that demanded answers. The old library became her second home, its musty scent and creaking floorboards now familiar companions. She spent hours poring over dusty archives, flipping through brittle pages of newspapers, journals, and town records from decades past. Each document felt like a piece of a puzzle waiting to be assembled, but the picture it formed was still blurry. As Clara dug deeper, she began to notice patterns in the stories surrounding Eleanor's disappearance. One recurring theme stood out: fear. Neighbors spoke of how Eleanor had seemed increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to her vanishing. Some mentioned seeing her glance over her shoulder as she walked home from school, while others recalled her locking her windows and drawing the curtains tight every evening. It was almost as though she believed someone, or something, was watching her. Intrigued by these accounts, Clara decided to expand her search beyond written records. She started visiting local residents who might remember Eleanor personally. Many of them were elderly now, their memories hazy and fragmented, but each conversation added another layer to the mystery. One afternoon, she visited an old woman named Mrs. Harper, who had been Eleanor's neighbor at the time of her disappearance. Sitting in Mrs. Harper's cozy living room, surrounded by faded photographs and knickknacks from another era, Clara listened intently as the frail woman recounted her memories. "Eleanor was always so kind," Mrs. Harper said, her voice trembling slightly. "She loved teaching her students and they adored her too. But toward the end, well, she changed. She stopped coming by for tea, avoided talking to anyone unless she absolutely had to. I remember asking her once if everything was all right and she just gave me this look, like she wanted to say something but couldn't." Mrs. Harper paused, her eyes distant as though reliving the moment. "Then one day I saw her packing boxes into her car late at night. When I asked where she was going, she said, Away from here. That was the last time I ever saw her. The story sent chills down Clara's spine. Why had Eleanor felt the need to leave? And why hadn't she gone through with it? These questions gnawed at her, driving her to seek out more clues. Another resident, Mr. Thompson, provided a different perspective. A former student of Eleanor's, he described her as a beacon of hope during his troubled childhood. "She believed in me when no one else did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But there was something else about her. I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes after class, I'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought, like she was worried about something big." When Clara pressed him for details, Mr. Thompson hesitated before revealing a startling memory. "One day I stayed late to finish a project, and I heard her talking to someone on the phone. She sounded scared, really scared. All I could make out was her saying, 'I can't keep doing this, they'll find out.' Then she hung up and looked around the room like she thought someone was listening. This snippet of information electrified Clara. Who was Eleanor afraid of? What secret was she trying to protect? As she left Mr. Thompson's house, her mind raced with possibilities. The more people she spoke to, the clearer it became that Eleanor had been caught in a web of danger, and whatever she knew had likely cost her dearly. Despite the mounting evidence pointing to foul play, not everyone in town was eager to help Clara uncover the truth. Some residents grew visibly uncomfortable when she brought up Eleanor's name, abruptly changing the subject or excusing themselves from the conversation. Others outright refused to discuss the matter, claiming it was ancient history best left alone. Their reluctance only fueled Clara's determination. She sensed that they were hiding something, whether out of fear or guilt. One particularly tense encounter occurred when Clara approached a man named Harold Dawson, a retired police officer who had worked on Eleanor's case back in the day. She found him sitting on his porch whittling a piece of wood with steady hands. At first, he seemed willing to talk, offering vague recollections of the investigation. But when Clara asked about potential suspects or motives, his demeanor shifted. "We did everything we could at the time," he said gruffly, avoiding her gaze. "Sometimes people just disappear. There's no rhyme or reason to it." "But you must have had theories," Clara persisted. "Surely there were leads you followed." Harold sighed heavily, setting down his knife. "Look, miss, some things are better left buried. Asking too many questions won't bring Eleanor back, and it might stir up trouble nobody wants." His words lingered in Clara's mind long after she left his house. Trouble for whom, she wondered. If Eleanor's disappearance had indeed been linked to something sinister, then perhaps those involved had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. The idea sent a shiver down her spine, but it also strengthened her resolve. She owed it to Eleanor and to herself to see this through. Amidst her research, Clara stumbled upon a detail that would prove pivotal. Eleanor had been romantically involved with a married man. The revelation came from a childhood friend of Eleanor's, Margaret, who reluctantly shared the information during a tearful phone call. She didn't want anyone to know, Margaret confessed. It was supposed to be a secret, but rumors spread, and people started treating her differently. Some even accused her of breaking up marriages. Clara's heart sank as she realized the implications. In a small town like this, scandal could easily spiral out of control. Jealousy, betrayal, and revenge were powerful motivators, and any one of them could have led to Eleanor's demise. Yet something about this explanation felt incomplete. While it explained the tension surrounding Eleanor's personal life, it didn't account for the cryptic phrase on her grave, or the sense that she had been running from something much larger than a love affair gone wrong. Determined to piece together the full picture, Clara returned to the library, this time focusing on the political and social climate of the town during the years leading up to Eleanor's disappearance. What she discovered shocked her. Newspaper clippings revealed allegations of corruption within the town council, including accusations of embezzlement and illegal land deals. Though none of the cases had been proven, the whispers of wrongdoing had circulated widely at the time. Could Eleanor have uncovered evidence of these crimes? Had she tried to expose the truth only to be silenced before she could act? The possibility electrified Clara. If true, Eleanor's story was far more complex and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. By the time night fell, Clara's head was spinning with theories. She sat at her desk, surrounded by notes and documents, trying to organize the chaotic jumble of information into a coherent narrative. As she stared at the photograph of Eleanor taped to the corner of her notebook, she felt a surge of admiration for the woman who had dared to challenge the status quo. Whatever secrets Eleanor had carried with her to the grave, Clara was determined to bring them into the light. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was certain. The truth lay closer than ever, hidden beneath layers of fear, denial, and deceit. And Clara wouldn't rest until she unearthed every last piece of it. Clara's investigation took a dramatic turn one rainy afternoon when she stumbled upon a discovery that would change everything. While sifting through a dusty box of donated books at the library, her fingers brushed against something unusual, tucked between the pages of an old leather-bound novel. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. But as Clara carefully unfolded it, her breath caught in her throat. It was a letter, written in elegant cursive handwriting that matched the few samples of Eleanor Grayson's penmanship she had seen. The letter was addressed simply, "To whom it may concern." Its contents were chilling. Eleanor wrote of her growing fear, describing how she felt trapped in a nightmare of her own making. She spoke of shadowy figures lurking outside her home late at night, peering through her windows, and leaving anonymous notes warning her to leave town. The most alarming part came near the end. "I know too much now," Eleanor confessed. "They won't let me go quietly. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out alive. Please, help me expose them before it's too late. Trust no one, not even those who seem kind." The abrupt ending left Clara reeling. Who had Eleanor been writing to? And why had this crucial piece of evidence been hidden away for so long? As she sat there staring at the fragile sheet of paper, her mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a cry for justice from beyond the grave. Determined to follow the trail Eleanor had left behind, Clara decided to track down any living relatives who might shed light on the mystery. After some research, she discovered that Eleanor had an estranged niece named Margaret Grayson, who now lived in a nearby city. Though hesitant to reach out, Margaret had already revealed sensitive information about Eleanor's personal life. During their earlier conversation, Clara knew she had no choice. Margaret was the only direct link to Eleanor's past, and her perspective could hold the key to unlocking the truth. When Clara finally managed to arrange a meeting, Margaret greeted her with visible apprehension. The woman was older now, her once vibrant features softened by time, but her sharp eyes betrayed a lingering sadness. Over tea in her modest apartment, Clara explained her findings, including the letter she had uncovered. Margaret listened silently, her expression unreadable until Clara finished speaking. "That letter," Margaret murmured, shaking her head slowly. "It sounds exactly like something Aunt Eleanor would write. She always believed someone was watching her even before she disappeared. But none of us took her seriously back then. We thought she was just paranoid." Clara leaned forward, eager to hear more. "Do you think she really uncovered something dangerous? Something worth killing over?" Margaret hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Aunt Eleanor was smart. Too smart for her own good sometimes. She had a way of seeing things others missed. When she started asking questions about certain people in town, the mayor, the council members, I told her to stop. I warned her it wasn't safe, but she wouldn't listen. She said the truth mattered more than anything else. Her voice cracked slightly as she added, and then one day, she was gone. Just like that. No goodbye, no explanation. We never heard from her again. The weight of Margaret's words hung heavy in the air. Clara pressed further, asking if Eleanor had mentioned specific names or incidents. Margaret shook her head, explaining that her aunt had been deliberately vague, likely out of fear of implicating anyone or putting herself in greater danger. However, she did share one startling detail. Shortly after Eleanor's disappearance, Several prominent townspeople died under suspicious circumstances. Their deaths were officially ruled accidents, a car crash here, a fall there, but Margaret believed they weren't coincidences. They were silenced, Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. Whoever Aunt Eleanor crossed paths with, they made sure no one could talk. The revelation sent a shiver down Clara's spine. If Margaret was right, then Eleanor's disappearance wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of intimidation and cover-ups. The realization filled Clara with both dread and determination. She couldn't back down now, not when the stakes were so high. Before leaving, Margaret handed Clara a small photograph she'd kept tucked away in a drawer. It showed Eleanor standing beside a group of people at what appeared to be a town event. Most of the faces were unfamiliar, but one man stood out. Harold Dawson, the retired police officer Clara had spoken to earlier. His presence in the photo raised unsettling questions. Had he known more about Eleanor's situation than he let on? Was his reluctance to discuss the case rooted in guilt or fear? As Clara drove home, her thoughts churned with new theories. Every clue seemed to point toward a conspiracy involving powerful figures in the town, yet concrete evidence remained elusive. The letter provided a glimpse into Eleanor's mindset, but without knowing who she intended to send it to, or whether they had ever received it. The puzzle remained incomplete. That night, unable to sleep, Clara sat at her desk poring over the photograph and rereading the letter. Her eyes kept returning to the phrase, "Trust no one, not even those who seem kind." What had Eleanor meant by that? Was she referring to friends, colleagues, or even family members? The warning felt deeply personal, as though Eleanor had anticipated betrayal from someone close to her. Suddenly, inspiration struck. If Eleanor had written the letter but never mailed it, perhaps she had hidden other documents elsewhere, items too sensitive to keep in her possession. The idea sparked a plan. Clara would return to the cemetery and examine Eleanor's grave more closely. Maybe the cryptic phrase etched into the marble slab, "The truth lies beneath," wasn't merely poetic symbolism. Perhaps it was literal. The next morning, armed with gloves, a flashlight, and a trowel borrowed from her neighbor, Clara ventured back to the abandoned cemetery. The weather had turned gloomy, with gray clouds hanging low over the landscape, casting long shadows across the graves. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Clara felt a strange sense of calm. She was on the verge of uncovering something monumental, and nothing, not even the creeping unease that prickled her skin, could deter her. Kneeling beside Eleanor's grave, Clara began carefully brushing away dirt and debris from around the base of the marble slab. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, anticipation building with each passing moment. Then, just as she was about to give up hope, her trowel struck something solid beneath the surface. Heart pounding, she dug deeper, revealing a small metal box partially buried in the soil. With great care, Clara pried open the rusted lid. Inside, she found a treasure trove of items, faded photographs, handwritten notes, official-looking documents, and a leather-bound journal belonging to Eleanor. Each object seemed to pulse with significance, whispering secrets from the past. Clara's eyes welled with tears as she realized the magnitude of what she held in her hands. This was Eleanor's final testament, a collection of evidence meant to expose the corruption and protect those who dared to seek the truth. As Clara flipped through the journal, her excitement mingled with sorrow. Eleanor's entries detailed her desperate attempts to gather proof of illegal activities within the town's leadership. Names, dates, and locations were meticulously recorded, alongside sketches and maps marking key locations. The journal also contained heartfelt reflections, capturing Eleanor's inner turmoil as she grappled with fear, loneliness, and the moral burden of knowing too much. By the time Clara left the cemetery, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the world in darkness. Yet she felt illuminated from within, driven by a newfound clarity. Eleanor's story was far bigger than she had imagined, an intricate web of power, greed, and betrayal that stretched across decades. And now it was up to Clara to bring it all to light. Though the road ahead promised danger and uncertainty, Clara knew she couldn't turn back. Eleanor's courage had inspired her, and her sacrifice demanded justice. With the metal box clutched tightly in her arms, Clara vowed to honor the woman whose voice had been silenced for too long. The truth lay within her grasp, and she wouldn't rest until the whole world knew it. The contents of the metal box Clara had unearthed from Eleanor Grayson's grave consumed her every waking moment. Each item inside seemed to carry a piece of the puzzle, and as she painstakingly examined them, the full scope of Eleanor's story began to unfold. The journal in particular became Clara's most treasured find. Its pages were filled with meticulous entries detailing not only Eleanor's fears, but also her determination to expose the corruption festering within the town. Names of influential figures appeared repeatedly: town council members, business owners, and even law enforcement officials, all implicated in schemes ranging from illegal land deals to embezzlement. As Clara read through the journal, one name stood out more than others: Victor Hargrove, a wealthy businessman who had been a cornerstone of the community during Eleanor's time. According to her notes, Hargrove was deeply involved in fraudulent activities, using his influence to manipulate local politics and silence anyone who dared oppose him. Eleanor wrote about how she had uncovered documents linking Hargrove to these crimes, evidence that could have destroyed his empire. But instead of bringing him down, her discovery had put a target on her back. Eleanor's final entry chilled Clara to the bone. Dated just days before her disappearance, it read, "I've made copies of everything and hidden them where no one will think to look. If something happens to me, I pray someone brave enough will find this and finish what I started. They won't. Stop until they're sure I can't speak. I'm running out of time." Clara's heart ached for Eleanor, whose courage had ultimately become her undoing. Yet there was also anger, a burning rage at the injustice that had silenced such a remarkable woman. Determined to honor Eleanor's sacrifice, Clara vowed to piece together the fragments of proof she had left behind. But handling such explosive information came with its own set of risks. Clara knew she couldn't trust anyone, not fully. Margaret's warning echoed in her mind. Trust no one. Even those who claimed to want justice might have ulterior motives. To protect herself and the evidence, Clara decided to work alone, keeping her discoveries hidden from prying eyes. Her first step was to verify the authenticity of the documents Eleanor had gathered. She reached out to an old college friend, Daniel, who now worked as a forensic analyst in the city. Though wary of involving anyone else, Clara trusted Daniel implicitly. He had always been loyal and discreet. Over a secure video call, she explained the situation without revealing too many specifics, asking if he could help authenticate the papers and photographs. Daniel agreed, intrigued by the challenge. He promised to keep everything confidential, cautioning Clara to stay vigilant. "If what you're dealing with is as dangerous as it sounds," he said gravely, "you need to be careful. People like this don't play fair." While waiting for Daniel's analysis, Clara turned her attention to the photographs Eleanor had included in the box. Some depicted familiar faces, Victor Hargrove among them, engaged in what appeared to be clandestine meetings. Others showed locations Eleanor had marked as significant: abandoned warehouses, secluded cabins, and even the basement of the town hall. These images painted a picture of a network operating in secrecy, shielded by power and privilege. One photograph caught Clara's eye, a grainy image of two men exchanging a briefcase under the cover of darkness. Squinting at the figures, Clara recognized Harold Dawson, the retired police officer she had interviewed earlier. His presence confirmed her suspicions. He wasn't merely a bystander in Eleanor's story. He was part of the conspiracy. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. How many others were complicit? And how deep did their involvement run? To answer these questions, Clara began cross-referencing the names and places mentioned in the journal with public records. What she found was staggering. Several of the individuals implicated in Eleanor's writings had died under mysterious circumstances shortly after her disappearance. Accidents that now seemed far from coincidental. A fire that destroyed a councilman's home. A car crash that killed a prominent lawyer. Even Harold Dawson's sudden retirement from the force took on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Each death had effectively erased a potential witness, ensuring the truth remained buried. Yet Clara couldn't shake the feeling that someone still alive must know more. Someone who had either participated in or been forced to turn a blind eye to the crimes. Her instincts told her to focus on Victor Hargrove, whose wealth and connections made him untouchable, or so he thought. With renewed resolve, Clara devised a plan to confront Hargrove directly. She would pose as a curious journalist writing a nostalgic piece about the town's history, using the guise of research to gain access to him. It was risky, but she needed answers, and Hargrove was the linchpin holding the entire operation together. If she could rattle him, maybe he'd slip up and reveal something useful. The meeting took place at Hargrove's sprawling estate, a mansion perched atop a hill overlooking the town. As Clara approached the front door, her nerves threatened to overwhelm her. But she reminded herself why she was there, for Eleanor, whose voice deserved to be heard. When Hargrove greeted her, his demeanor was polite yet guarded. He led her to a lavish sitting room adorned with expensive art and furniture, offering her tea with an air of practiced charm. "I understand you're interested in our little town's past?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Yes," Clara replied, forcing a smile. "I'm exploring how places like this evolve over time. Your contributions to the community are well documented, of course." Hargrove chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Ah, yes, I've tried to do my part, but times change, don't they? People forget." Clara seized the opportunity. "Some memories linger longer than others, like Eleanor Grayson, for instance. Do you remember her?" For a split second, Hargrove's mask slipped. His jaw tightened and his fingers curled around the armrest. Then, just as quickly, he recovered, his expression smoothing into indifference. "Eleanor? Yes, vaguely. A teacher, wasn't she? Tragic, what happened?" "Tragic indeed," Clara agreed, watching him closely. She seemed to believe she was uncovering something important before she disappeared. Any idea what that might have been? Hargrove shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Not a clue. People often imagine conspiracies where none exist. Perhaps she got caught up in her own fantasies." His dismissive tone rankled Clara, but she kept her composure. Maybe. Or maybe she saw something she shouldn't have. Either way, it's fascinating how some stories refuse to fade. Hargrove's gaze hardened, though he maintained his facade. "Indeed. Well, I hope you find your answers, Miss. Just Clara," she said, rising from her seat. "Thank you for your time." As she left the mansion, Clara felt both exhilarated and uneasy. Hargrove's reaction had confirmed her suspicions. He knew more than he let on. Whether he was directly responsible for Eleanor's fate or simply protecting his interests, he was undoubtedly tied to the web of deceit. Back at her desk, Clara reviewed her notes from the encounter, piecing together the subtle clues Hargrove had unknowingly revealed. Combined with the evidence from the journal and Daniel's preliminary report, which confirmed the authenticity of the documents, she finally had a solid foundation for her exposé. The truth was undeniable, and it was time to bring it into the light. Yet as Clara typed the first words of her article, a nagging doubt lingered. Exposing the conspiracy would come at a cost. Powerful people would fight back, and Clara's life might never be the same. Still, she reminded herself of Eleanor's bravery, the risks she had taken to ensure the truth didn't die with her. Inspired by her example, Clara pressed on, knowing that some battles were worth fighting no matter the consequences. The stage was set. The world was about to learn what really happened to Eleanor Grayson, and the dark secrets lurking beneath the surface of the seemingly idyllic town. Clara's exposé hit the press like a storm, shaking the small town to its core. The article, titled "Beneath the Surface: The Truth About Eleanor Grayson," laid bare the decades-old conspiracy that had haunted the community in silence. With meticulous detail, Clara recounted Eleanor's story, the fear she lived with, the evidence she gathered, and the price she ultimately paid for seeking justice. She included copies of the documents Eleanor had hidden, along with photographs and excerpts from her journal. Each word was carefully chosen, not just to inform but to ignite outrage. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours of publication, the article spread like wildfire, shared across social media platforms and picked up by national news outlets. People who had never heard of Eleanor Grayson were suddenly demanding answers. Locals who had long suspected foul play in their town now had proof to back their suspicions. For many it was a reckoning, a moment of clarity that forced them to confront the darkness they'd ignored for so long. Victor Hargrove, once untouchable, found himself at the center of the maelstrom. Reporters camped outside his mansion, cameras flashing as he attempted to leave under the cover of night. His lawyer issued vague statements denying any wrongdoing, but the public wasn't buying it. Decades of whispers about his shady dealings resurfaced, amplified by Clara's revelations. Other names mentioned in the exposé, former council members, business partners, and even Harold Dawson, were dragged into the spotlight, their past actions scrutinized with fresh eyes. For Clara, watching the fallout unfold was both exhilarating and terrifying. On one hand, she felt vindicated. Her hard work had brought Eleanor's truth to light, fulfilling the promise she had made to herself. But on the other hand, she couldn't ignore the backlash. Threatening messages flooded her inbox, accusing her of slander or worse. Some came from anonymous accounts, while others bore the signatures of people she recognized, locals who preferred to keep the past buried. One message stood out, chilling her to the bone. "You've opened Pandora's box. Be ready for what comes next." Despite the threats, Clara refused to back down. She knew the risks when she decided to publish the article, and she believed wholeheartedly in the importance of exposing the truth. Still, the pressure weighed heavily on her. Sleep eluded her, and she began noticing strange occurrences around her house. Lights flickering, odd noises in the dead of night. At first, she dismissed them as paranoia, but as the incidents grew more frequent, she couldn't help but wonder if someone was trying to intimidate her into silence. Margaret, Eleanor's niece, reached out soon after the article went live. Her voice trembled with emotion as she thanked Clara for giving Eleanor a voice. "She deserves this," Margaret said. "But please be careful. These people, they don't forgive easily." Clara appreciated the concern, but assured Margaret she wouldn't stop until justice was served. "Eleanor gave everything to fight for the truth," she replied. "I owe it to her to see this through." Meanwhile, law enforcement finally stepped in, spurred by public outcry. Investigators reopened Eleanor's case, combing through the evidence Clara had uncovered. Search warrants were issued for properties linked to Victor Hargrove and his associates, including the abandoned warehouse Eleanor had marked in her journal. What they found was damning. Financial records, forged documents, and even physical evidence tying Hargrove to the deaths of several individuals implicated in the conspiracy. As arrests were made and charges filed, the town grappled with the reality of its tainted history. Neighbors turned against neighbors, old alliances crumbled, and trust became a rare commodity. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was also a sense of catharsis. For years, the weight of unspoken truths had hung over the town. Like a dark cloud, now though painful, the truth offered a chance to heal. During this time, Clara received unexpected support from an unlikely source, Daniel, her forensic analyst friend. After verifying the authenticity of Eleanor's documents, he had grown, invested in the case, offering guidance and resources whenever Clara needed them. He urged her to document every step of the investigation, not only to protect herself but also to preserve the integrity of the story. "This isn't just about Eleanor anymore," he told her. "It's about holding power accountable. Don't let anyone twist the narrative." Encouraged by his words, Clara continued updating her readers through a series of follow-up articles. She chronicled the arrests, the court proceedings, and the reactions of those affected by the scandal. Each piece was met with widespread acclaim, solidifying her reputation as a fearless journalist willing to take on the most daunting challenges. Yet, amid the triumphs, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still watching her. Late one evening, as she sat at her desk typing up notes, she glanced out the window and froze. A shadowy figure stood near the edge of her property, partially obscured by the trees. Her heart raced as she grabbed her phone, ready to call the police. But when she looked again, the figure was gone, leaving behind only the rustling leaves. Was it paranoia, or was someone truly following her? Clara didn't know, but she resolved to remain vigilant. If Eleanor's story had taught her anything, it was that the truth often came at a cost, and sometimes the battle didn't end with exposure. One day, while reviewing Eleanor's journal for additional insights, Clara stumbled upon a passage she hadn't noticed before. It was written in a hurried scrawl, as though Eleanor had penned it in haste. If you're reading this, I hope you understand why I did what I did. Corruption thrives in silence, but courage can break its hold. I may not survive this fight, but my spirit will endure. Let the truth guide you, and remember, you are never alone. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she read the words. They weren't just a message, they were a lifeline, connecting her to Eleanor across the decades. In that moment, Clara realized she wasn't merely uncovering a story, she was honoring a legacy. Eleanor's bravery had inspired her own, and no amount of fear or intimidation could diminish that. As the legal proceedings against Victor Hargrove and his accomplices moved forward, Clara took solace in knowing that justice, however delayed, was finally within reach. The town would never be the same, it couldn't be, but perhaps that was a good thing. Healing required facing the pain head-on, acknowledging the scars left behind by greed and betrayal. Still, Clara knew the journey wasn't over. Even as the headlines faded and life in the town slowly returned to normal, she couldn't escape the lingering presence of Eleanor's story. It followed her like a ghost, whispering reminders that some truths refused to stay buried. Whether it was the faint sound of footsteps echoing in empty hallways or the sensation of being watched in crowded rooms, Clara couldn't deny the connection she felt to Eleanor. In the end, Clara chose to embrace it. She dedicated her work to Eleanor, vowing to continue fighting for justice wherever it was needed. The grave that had once hidden a tragic secret now stood as a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of courage and the enduring quest for truth. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Clara walked it with purpose, guided by the words engraved on Eleanor's marble slab, "The truth lies beneath." And so the story of Eleanor Grayson became more than a tale of corruption and loss. It became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of history, the airy light of truth could shine through. The aftermath of Clara's exposé rippled through the town like waves on a restless sea. The arrests of Victor Hargrove and his associates marked the beginning of a long overdue reckoning, but the scars left by decades of corruption ran deep. For many residents, the revelations were both validating and devastating. They had lived under the shadow of lies for so long that confronting the truth felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Conversations once whispered in hushed tones now echoed openly in cafes, parks, and community meetings. People shared their memories of Eleanor Grayson, piecing together fragments of her life and honoring her courage. Victor Hargrove, once a towering figure in the town, was reduced to a broken man behind bars. His empire crumbled as investigations uncovered layer upon layer of fraud, bribery, and worse. Other accomplices faced similar fates, some pleading guilty in exchange for reduced sentences, others vowing to fight the charges despite overwhelming evidence. Courtrooms buzzed with tension as witnesses testified, some trembling with fear, others filled with righteous anger. Every session brought new details to light, painting a grim picture of how far those in power had gone to protect their secrets. For Clara, watching the legal proceedings unfold was a mix of satisfaction and unease. She had achieved what she set out to do, expose the truth about Eleanor's disappearance and hold the perpetrators accountable. Yet, the cost of her success weighed heavily on her. Threats continued to pour in, forcing her to take precautions she never imagined necessary. She installed security cameras around her home, avoided predictable routines, and relied on trusted friends like Daniel for support. Despite these measures, the feeling of being watched lingered, gnawing at her peace of mind. One evening, as Clara sat alone in her dimly lit living room, she found herself staring at the photograph of Eleanor she had kept from the metal box. In it, Eleanor stood smiling, surrounded by colleagues at a town event. Her eyes sparkled with warmth and intelligence, betraying no hint of the turmoil that awaited her. Clara traced the image with her fingers, whispering softly, "You did your part. Now let me finish mine." Her words seemed to hang in the air, unanswered yet strangely comforting. Over time, Clara began to notice subtle changes in her surroundings. Lights flickered when there was no breeze. Doors creaked without explanation. Once she swore she heard faint footsteps trailing behind her during a late-night walk, though turning around revealed nothing but empty streets. At first, she dismissed these occurrences as stress-induced paranoia, but as they persisted, she couldn't help but wonder if Eleanor's presence lingered, not as a threat but as a guardian watching over her work. Margaret, Eleanor's niece, became a frequent source of strength for Clara during this period. Their bond deepened as they exchanged stories about Eleanor, sharing laughter and tears over coffee or phone calls. Margaret admitted that she had always regretted not doing more to help her aunt when she needed it most. "I was young and scared," she confessed. "But you've given Eleanor a voice she deserved all along." Clara nodded, grateful for Margaret's understanding. Together they visited Eleanor's grave one crisp autumn morning, bringing fresh flowers and a sense of closure. Standing before the marble slab engraved with "The Truth Lies Beneath," Clara felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude for Eleanor's bravery, for Margaret's support, and for the resilience of the human spirit. As weeks turned into months, the town slowly began to rebuild itself. The scandal forced difficult conversations about accountability, transparency, and trust. New leaders emerged, committed to creating a future free from the shadows of the past. Community forums were held to address lingering fears and foster healing. Though progress was slow, the collective effort signaled hope, a determination to learn from mistakes and move forward. Clara documented every step of this transformation in her writing. Her articles evolved from investigative reports to reflections on justice, memory, and redemption. Readers praised her ability to capture the complexity of the town's journey, applauding her for shining a light where darkness had thrived for too long. Awards poured in recognizing her contributions to journalism, but Clara remained humble. "This isn't my story," she often said. "It belongs to Eleanor and everyone who refused to look away." Yet even as accolades mounted, Clara couldn't escape the haunting echoes of Eleanor's legacy. Late at night, when the world grew quiet, she sometimes felt a gentle nudge, a reminder that the work wasn't entirely done. Corruption might have been rooted out in this small town, but it existed elsewhere, thriving in silence until someone dared to challenge it. Inspired by Eleanor's example, Clara resolved to continue fighting, not just for one woman's memory but for countless others whose voices had been silenced. In the end, Clara came to understand that Eleanor's story transcended time and place. It was a testament to the courage required to stand against injustice, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The grave that had once hidden a tragic secret now symbolized something greater: the enduring power of truth and the indomitable will to seek it. On the anniversary of Eleanor's disappearance, Clara returned to the cemetery, carrying a single white rose. As she placed it gently atop the marble slab, she whispered, "Thank you." Whether directed at Eleanor or the universe itself, the words carried weight. They acknowledged the sacrifices made, the battles fought, and the victories won. Walking away from the grave, Clara glanced back one last time. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden rays across the headstones. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a figure standing near Eleanor's grave, a silhouette bathed in light. But when she blinked, it vanished, leaving only stillness behind. Though questions remained about the strange phenomena she experienced, about whether Eleanor truly watched over her, Clara chose to embrace the mystery. Some truths, she realized, didn't need answers. They simply existed, guiding those brave enough to listen. And so Clara walked on, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Armed with Eleanor's courage and her own unwavering resolve, she stepped into the unknown, knowing that the pursuit of truth would always be worth the risk. After all, as Eleanor had written so many years ago, courage can break its hold, and break it, they did, together.